Hello and welcome back to the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with me here and now. I'm really pleased that you're here. And if it's your first time stopping in, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, leave a comment, provide some feedback, whatever it may be. It really helps this podcast grow and evolve and carry out our mission of, sharing information and inspiration to the world, to people just like you when it comes to the individual health and the health of our planet. So that's exactly what this conversation is all about. That's exactly what pretty much every conversation is all about on this podcast. But this one's unique in the fact that it's not really an interview of, a question and answer and these sort of things. It's much more of a conversation, and I would even go as far as to call it a debate. And the reason why I say that is because at many points in this conversation, I do get heated up, a little passionate, a little fiery when it comes to my stance and my beliefs and what I know to be true for myself and what I observe to be true in the world. But our guest, even though he does have very common visions and intentions when it comes to, holistic health individually and also healing the planet, he's going about it from a different perspective. And I just want to say that I think it's really important to be having conversations just like this, to be stepping out of our chamber of, our environment where we're just talking with people who agree with us and who have common beliefs, common understandings, common philosophies. And I think branching out and having these more difficult conversations and stretching into that space is really important and really healthy and a really essential part for evolving, collectively, and also evolving thought and thinking and creative ideas and solutions to all of the issues and epidemics and environmental catastrophes that we're faced with today. So even though we do have conflicting beliefs, I think that a lot of good has come from this conversation. And before we get into that good, I do want to introduce our guest, who is Dr. Stephen Hussey. He is a board-certified chiropractor and functional medicine practitioner. He has a bachelor's degree in health and wellness promotion from the University of North Carolina, Asheville. He also has a master's in human nutrition and functional medicine and his doctorate in chiropractic, all from the University of Western States. He recently wrote a book called Health Evolution: Why Understanding Evolution is the Key to Vibrant Health. And you can learn more about Dr. Stephen Hussey at www.resourceyourhealth.com. And of course, learn more about him in this episode and so much more at www.alter.health/episode 76. And before we dive into this conversation, I do want to just emphasize the take-home message. Hopefully you get to the end where we really kind of settle on that common ground. But it is a windy path as we discuss so many things in this almost hour and a half episode. So the common ground that we settle upon is really the importance of raising our consciousness, raising our awareness and our mindfulness of our impact as human beings on this precious planet Earth. And it might sound really, trite and cliche and like a duh kind of thing, but I think the fact of the matter is that we need to reach some sort of collective, critical mass. We're on our way there, and I think we need to remember that. But being mindful personally is the place to start, and also sharing that mindfulness in your community and reminding people in a compassionate and gentle way to just be mindful of how your choices and decisions from whether it's food or transportation or anything else, be mindful of how you are impacting your planet. So that's kind of the take-home message, but like I said, we cover a lot in this longer episode, so hopefully you're able to enjoy this one. And if you do, just a reminder to subscribe, rate, review, leave some feedback. We'd really appreciate it. And why don't we sit back and enjoy this one with our guest, Dr. Stephen Hussey. Dr. Stephen Hussey. Welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Well, I'm excited to talk to you because this should be a great conversation. We've got similar visions and similar intentions, and we come from different perspectives, I think. And would you mind by just starting by sharing your background? And I know you're a chiropractic doctor. Can you kind of just share how you got into that?
Yeah, so I guess, well, applying to chiropractic school was kind of a last minute thing. My girlfriend at the time had gotten into naturopathic school out in Oregon, and I wanted to be close to her. So I was looking for schools out there, and I was like, oh, chiropractors. I've been to chiropractors my whole life. Maybe I'll apply there. And it happened, and then as I got into school, I realized my passion for health and everything like that. But I found that I guess what I learned in school kind of came up short for what I was wanting to learn about, health and life in general. And so I went on and got my master's in functional medicine and nutrition. And then I've spent a lot of time looking into, ecology and evolution and things like that, and how that plays a part in health as well. So that's kind of what I'm passionate about now.
Cool. Do you have a degree in evolutionary biology or anything like that? What's your undergrad in?
Undergrad's just health and wellness promotion.
Okay.
So no degree there, just a lot of outside research.
Yeah, and it seems like you also have, like me, a good amount of passion and enthusiasm on the topic. Could you share like where that comes from, how you've gotten inspired about kind of the global perspective?
Yeah, so I think that, in my studies, what I've come across is that, we humans have been kind of divorced from nature, and that nature is, and the aspects of nature and what our bodies come in contact with when we're in nature, and the food that nature supplies is the best for us. And so protecting that and really, educating people the importance of having those natural environments around us is really, really important. And I think, it's widespread knowledge that, our natural world is being depleted, and it's shrinking as we speak. So protecting that is incredibly important for each of us individually in our own health journey, but also for our species as a whole. And so I'm really passionate about spreading that awareness so that we can take a different path, I think.
When did this first come into your awareness, this whole epidemic, this issue of, our species being kind of threatened, so to speak?
Well, that was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I read a lot of Jared Diamond and his work in New Guinea and just his, environmentalist approach and the things, my background in health and knowing all, the biochemical stuff and all the ways that that's affected. I kind of just had this like epiphany moment, like, oh, they're kind of the same thing. And I noticed that, the further that humans got from nature, the research is backing up that, all the aspects of living in a city and, the population and the drop in nutrient quality of food and those types of things are all a result of us being divorced from nature. So it was really Jared Diamond. He had a huge influence on me. But even further back, I mean, when I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I've been kind of immersed in this healthcare world that never really worked for me. And I didn't really find that out until maybe my senior year of college. Find out that, what I did, the environment I put my body in had a direct result of how well I could take care of diabetes. No doctor ever really told me that. And so it was all about environment. And so then I started looking for the correct environment for a human to be in to thrive. And it kind of led me down that path. So I started reading environmental books, led me to Jared Diamond, and just put all the pieces together.
Cool. Could you share a little bit more about your environment, your experience with, like you talked about being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and finding the environment that supported you in thriving? It sounds like that's kind of has been your personal mission. Could you share about like what that has looked like, what that environment is? And
Yeah,
I'd love to hear.
So I guess, so age 9, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is autoimmune, inflammatory in nature, but I also had a lot of other inflammatory conditions. I used to break out in chronic hives, had asthma, lots of different allergies, irritable bowel syndrome, that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I saw, endocrinologists and specialists my whole life, and never really gave me answers. It was just always, take more insulin or other medications. And so I didn't really like that approach. I figured that, something was going wrong with me, and I wanted to know why. And so I figured out that, when you study evolution, it's all about the environment. The environment and the interaction with the genes drive natural selection. And so I figured that, the environment had to be affecting my body in some way. And so, long story short, I've realized that, the things that I do every single day allow me to use, a fraction of the insulin that I use in my insulin pump, because it's a diet designed for the in human species, which is a, lower carbohydrate, or if you're going to eat carbohydrates, be a nutrient dense carbohydrate rather than nutrient poor carbohydrates. So, I mean, as far as my environment, it's avoiding of toxins for sure. Those things drive inflammation, such as things like mold and heavy metals, things like that, will just, cause my autoimmunity to ramp up, which causes issues. Ultimately, what caused, the type 1 diabetes in the first place. It's a lower carbohydrate, higher fat diet that stabilizes blood sugar, because fat has no effect on blood sugar, and protein, a little bit effect on blood sugar, but not as much as, say, like a processed carbohydrate. So that makes it really easy for me to maintain, an A1C of lower than 6, which as a type 1 diabetic is impressive to endocrinologists. They don't know how I do it. And then I guess it's a very low stress environment. So I live out in the woods, or as close to the woods as I can get, because nature has that calming effect on people. And so stress definitely makes it hard to manage blood sugar. And so I found that, the more even keeled I can be, the better, easy it is to maintain. And so I've gone from, probably close to 100 units of insulin a day to about 30. And that includes when I bolus for meals and everything like that. So, which the research is pretty profound, and that lower insulin levels are extremely good for health. So I could control that and just not give myself insulin, but that wouldn't be smart if I was eating a high carbohydrate diet. So the way I keep it low is that higher fat diet, which keeps my metabolism going, but also keeps my blood sugar, or allows me to use less insulin to keep my blood sugar lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating how you've got this condition, and it sounds like you have a pump. You have a
insulin pump.
Do you have a continuous monitor?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I tend to not want to be hooked up to too many different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like that it does still provide a good level of biofeedback, and like you're able to see like, oh, I'm stressed out. Oh, I'm thinking this. Oh, I'm eating this, and this is what's happening in my body, and I can really see it. I can feel it. Probably, I'm sure you can feel like being out of balance, and you can also see it.
Mm-hmm.
With data points. So that's very cool.
Yeah. It forced me to be a biohacker.
Yeah. Cool. So that sort of diet has been working for you. And is that the diet that you like prescribe or recommend in general for the whole population?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely know that people have different viewpoints and things, but yeah, in general, lower carbohydrate, or at least not necessarily lower carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are important. We need them, but nutrient dense carbohydrates, that's the important thing. And that's what I like to teach people, is not, don't worry about, counting your macros and, keto versus paleo versus whatever diet there is. It's how do you find the most nutrient dense food source in any situation that you're in, and choose that one for your health. So.
Yeah. No, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Furman, the nutritarian diet, nutrient density? That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really resonate with that. And, it's interesting because we both are coming from that perspective, but I see nutrient density differently. Nutrients are most dense in plants, and plants, even more carbohydrate rich plants have the highest levels of nutrient density that I'm aware of. And, the animal products, they kind of accumulate nutrient density in a different way. But could you kind of share this conversation with me and speak to how you see nutrient density differently than where I'm coming from?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're spot on. I mean, definitely plants have lots of nutrients. They have a lot more things like polyphenols and antioxidants that we wouldn't find in animal products. However, it's hard for us to extract all the nutrients from plants, unlike it is for lots of different animals. So if you look at, say, some of our closest living relatives, they're primates, like a gorilla, for instance. Like if we look at all the primates, the gorilla is kind of the exact opposite of us. It has the smallest brain and the longest digestive system. And so it's made for eating plants, which is what it does, although it also eats insects. Whereas us humans, we have the largest brain and the shortest digestive tract. So we're made for more omnivorous type of diet.
I didn't know that our digestive tract was significantly shorter than a gorilla's.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
well, cool. I'm gonna have to look that up after, because I've always, when I look at kind of the anatomical comparisons, I see that, jaw structure might be one kind of slight difference between humans and primates. Primates have a
yeah.
little bit more of the ability to, like, they're a little bit more omnivorous in nature, in the sense that they can rip apart things.
Uh-huh.
But I thought that digestive wise, we're pretty, between the throat and the anus, I thought we're pretty similar.
No, the gorillas is actually significantly shorter or longer than ours. And ours is the shortest of the primates. Chimpanzees and bonobos are kind of in the middle. But they also eat animals. It's very hierarchical, much more hierarchical than humans are. What do they call them? The male, the alpha male. He's the one who always gets the meat, and any scraps are kind of left to the rest of the tribe of apes there. So it's definitely a highly sought after nutrient when it does come around.
Cool. So you're saying that, so that human beings aren't really able to extract nutrients from plants as well as other primates.
Yeah, well, especially gorillas. But yeah, that's kind of the basis. I mean, plant proteins and nutrients are bound to cellulose, because that's, plant structure is lots of cellulose. And we can definitely get a lot of nutrients from it, obviously. And plant-based is something I advocate for sure. But I do think that over time we will become deficient in some nutrients, not eating animals.
Could you share what those nutrients are?
So fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Some, like the real form of vitamin A, is only found in animal products. And the K2, so K1 we can find a lot in, kale is probably the most prevalent source of K1, but K2 is mainly found in, animals who are eating their natural diet. So it's really hard to get enough K2, which is really important for bone health, if you're not eating animal products. The other ones are B12, and also collagen protein, which is very important for structure, as far as, our skin, our hair, our nails, our joints, tendons, ligaments, things like that.
Yeah. So I know that, yeah, I've got a different, I've got a different viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's great to be familiar with, like, the kind of the thought process behind, eating these more nutrient dense animal products that
Yeah.
provide these vitamins, because I know that the human body is able to assimilate these nutrients and pre-vitamins and such in a way that might not be, might not be as capable of getting as high of a degree of, say, vitamin A in the active form in our diets from plant foods as compared to animal foods.
Right.
But my understanding is that that level of vitamin A that we are able to get into our diet and activate through our enzymes and our human physiology,
Mm-hmm.
my understanding is that that is the most kind of bioavailable and optimal source of that vitamin. So it's not necessarily about quantity, it's more about the quality of the vitamin.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, beta carotene and vitamin A is probably the most famous one.
Yeah.
People say we can get, all our vitamin A from carrots, but that's really beta carotene, and we can make vitamin A from beta carotene, but it's kind of it's not a very efficient process in our body. And so the way I see things is, why make your body do more work? If we want optimal nutrition, let's give it something that it can use right away. instead of having to convert it to something else.
Okay. Well, so this is a good segue into the work piece, because animal protein takes a lot of work for the human digestive tract to break down, rip apart those amino acids, absorb and assimilate those amino acids. And I know that on a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, a lot of people are using the word plant-based just to say,
Right.
like, oh, like a serving of meat and mostly plants on the plate. But when you look at like the calorie breakdown, it's an animal-based diet,
Yeah.
So a plant-based diet to me is a vegan diet. And what was I getting at? Oh, like eating
Right.
plants, eating plant-based proteins, a lower protein diet in general, a lower fat diet in general. That's just naturally a plant-based diet is lower in fat and protein. It's not like you have to go out of your way to eliminate fats,
Mm-hmm.
but eating that sort of diet just provides less work for the digestive system. Do you agree with that?
I don't have any numbers or anything. I can't prove it, but I do know that it's hard for our bodies to, get those proteins away from cellulose. They're bound to that cellulose, which is what the longer digestion of a cow or a gorilla is useful for, because it's in
So
there
you're so you're
longer.
saying the so you're saying the plant-based proteins are more difficult to digest.
Not necessarily digest, but for the body to extract that protein from it. So it may end up going all the way through the digestive system, and we've only gotten a fraction of the protein that the plant has, because it's
Yeah.
hard to get away from the cellulose. And the
Have you
cellulose
ever?
is the
Yeah.
fiber that will come out the other end.
Well, the cellulose is fiber that feeds a lot of our healthy gut microbiome that we know,
Yeah,
different
yeah.
forms of cellulose. But have you ever seen a protein deficiency in a human?
Um, I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Have you worked with a lot of vegan or people who don't eat meat?
Yeah. I mean, I used to be one of them. I was
Yeah.
vegan for 2 years, so
Did you develop a protein deficiency?
no. But it doesn't mean that I wouldn't have. It doesn't mean that it was healthy for me. It doesn't mean that some people don't do better on a vegan diet than others. I think that
Yeah.
long term, it's not the best solution for like long term health. But I mean, we all have different genes. We all have different microbiomes. Some people can do really well on a plant based diet, like a vegan diet. Some people need animal proteins more. I think that we have no evidence whatsoever of any human population over generations being vegan. If I see that two humans can make another human, and that human can get with another human and make another human, and they've all been vegan through 3-4 generations, and we have a healthy child at the end, then yeah, I'm sold. It can happen. But the way I see things through an evolutionary perspective is that there's no way. I mean, humans, since 6 million years ago, since we split off from apes, have been eating animals, and that's evident through what we find in the teeth of archaeological evidence, what we find in the gut of those that are preserved, like the Viking man that was frozen up in wherever it was, China or something. But also that the evidence that we have that humans were cracking open skulls and bones, eating bone marrow and brains. So humans have been eating parts of animals for a very, very long time. And
Mhm.
if we wanted to be vegan, we could do it, but it would take many, many generations to evolve to be able to do it. Like, that's just how evolution works.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to move toward that type of diet, if you argue that it was sustainable and that that's what we need to do to preserve our earth, we would need a long-term plan to do that. Because our genes right now, based on what we've been doing for millions of years, are not set up for that.
So I'm just curious on the evidence or science or whatever you want to call it to back up
Yeah.
that statement. Like our genes, the human genome is not capable of being a vegan.
Well, it's just based on the fact that, I mean, just how evolution works. I mean, I couldn't sit here and, I mean, I'm not a geneticist. I'm not, testing genes and that kind of stuff. So I couldn't tell you like specific genes that are pro or con or whatever for veganism.
So
But
you're mainly looking at the epidemiological evidence and saying that there hasn't been a vegan culture that has thrived.
yeah, so I think that, hunting an animal is a very energy expending thing. And that humans wouldn't have gone to that, it wouldn't have gone to that extreme and wasted all the energy if it wasn't something that they absolutely needed for to survive in the wild,
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, we're definitely, I think we can agree that today is definitely different times than the caveman days. And we have a
yes,
lot of access to anything at our disposal, like literally
yes, but
way.
if you look at how our genes were formed for millions of years, that's what they were formed doing. And so if we, and like I said, it takes, Dmitry Belyov, the Russian scientist who, selectively bred foxes for docile traits, show that it takes at least 30 generations to get any genetic change, like behavioral or physiologic changes, not physiologic, but physical changes.
Mm.
So if we wanted to do that, it would take much longer than just, 4 or 5 generations, since, the vegan idea has been around,
Mm. Well, I think that the vegan idea has been around for longer than that. I think that it just maybe hasn't been stated as such.
Yeah.
For example, Roman gladiators were vegan.
I mean, I've read that Roman gladiators, or maybe not gladiators, but Roman soldiers they all were required to have cod liver oil. That's what they did every day. They all were given cod liver oil. Gladiators, I don't know. I mean, they could have been vegan, but that may have been because animal products were valued higher and seen
Yeah.
as something that people ate higher, and the gladiators were kind of slaves, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, going back to the caveman days.
Yeah.
So, just reminiscing on those caveman days. So do you think that people were hunting out of like necessity for meat, or do you think that people were hunting out of necessity for fuel?
I think it's fuel. I mean, I think that it was fat. That's what they were looking for.
Right. So they didn't necessarily need the animal flesh. They needed just calories, right, to survive.
Potentially, but if you look at animal fats versus plant fats, I mean, animal fats are going to have more of those fat
Way
soluble nutrients.
dense.
Yeah.
Well, fat is fat, in terms of caloric density, 9
Right.
calories.
Yeah. But as far as like nutrients, there's different nutrients from a plant fat and an animal fat. So if it's a wild animal, like the fat soluble vitamins are way higher, especially the vitamin A. That is something that they're going to have way higher amounts of, and vitamin K2, which is only in animal fats.
So you're kind of coming from this perspective of more is better, which I don't know if more is better. I don't know if there's like an optimal kind of middle ground. I don't know if like,
Uh-huh.
I know that people can overdose on, if you've heard that story of the guy eating dogs, the guy eating
No.
he was stranded in the Arctic or something and had to eat
Uh-huh.
his dogs,
Uh-huh.
and he ate the dog livers and got vitamin A toxicity. So obviously we know that these fat
Yeah.
soluble
Yeah.
vitamins, they can become toxic in our bodies.
Mhm.
So that leads us to know that more isn't better. Like there is a middle, range where we
Yeah.
want to be as humans. And I just don't know that eating animals are required to access and maintain a middle range. Maybe in the caveman days, maybe it was required because,
Yeah.
there wasn't any sort of agricultural system that provided a sustainable source of plant-based nutrients.
Uh-huh.
So they were just running after whatever sort of calorie they could get,
Yeah.
which I think is probably the case. And so it was more of out of necessity that we were hunting and stabbing flesh in order to, procreate.
Yeah.
But I think that
But
we've
again, that would mean that our genes evolved in a way with us eating animals. So there's no way that our current set of genes would have given us a negative effect from eating animals because we evolved eating them.
we've also evolved drinking alcohol, and we don't need alcohol to like live.
No, not at
You know,
all.
we've
But
also
that's a toxin, and that's a very new thing. I don't know that cavemen were fermenting grains.
well, alcohol has, I don't know about caveman, but alcohol has quite a history, definitely more than
Oh
40
yeah,
generations or whatever. And there's a lot of things that we've evolved doing that I feel like are not necessary to continue going, because I like to remind myself that I love the term evolution, what
Mhm.
that means is that we're always like growing and changing and forming.
Mhm.
And I understand that evolution from a human genome perspective takes 40 generations or whatever at least to get any sort of genetic
At least,
variation.
yeah.
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 So this is, yes, which is 40 generations is what, like 1,000 years? Not, not quite,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
um,
And that's with very select breeding. Like usually it doesn't happen that fast. That's with very select, someone controlling the selection,
correct. So so evolution is always happening.
Yeah.
And caveman days were really a long time ago.
Yeah.
And, things, it's like we have evolved. I don't know what our genetics, how much genetic variability we have, versus today versus caveman days, but we have evolved. And, genome or not, we are evolving to, maybe we're evolving and we don't need meat,
I mean,
like,
potentially, yes,
yeah,
but so to give you some perspective, I guess, as
yeah,
far as the timeline, humans split from apes about 6 million years ago. 6 million years ago. So like the oldest civilization we know of is only 10,000 years ago. And that's the, 10 to 12,000 years ago is when we started farming. So if we were to put all of human life, what is the word, lifespan on
mhm,
into like one day, like a 24-hour clock, we would start farming like with a minute or two left in that day. So for most of the day, most of the time we've been modern humans, we have not been farming. So
the
our
vast
gene,
majority of time, yeah, like
yeah. So
huge majority of time.
the genes are pretty much pretty set in stone there. Like it would be hard to change those in 10,000 years. So yes, I think there has been some evolution in 10,000 years of farming, but to totally take out animal products, I think is not really taking into consideration the how many more years we were eating animals, or at least some form of, whether it was the brains or the bone marrow or meat or whatever it was. I think that's too short of a time to think that we could just make the jump already to no animal products.
Mm.
And obviously some people's genes are different. Some people can handle it better than others. But I don't think it's sustainable as far as health goes for everyone.
So are you familiar with some genetic studies looking at amylose in the human genome?
No.
Or not amylose, amylase, the enzyme to break down starch.
No.
Um,
What do they say?
they've been able to go back and look at the copies of the human amylase gene, and I'm not able to quote the research, but they're seeing that there is increasing amounts, starting from way back, whenever they started, maybe 10,000 years ago or whatever. They're seeing
Yeah.
that there's increased copies of the human amylase gene to break down starch. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think human history from the point of humans splitting from apes, like you were talking about, humans have relied on starch for survival,
Mm-hmm.
from the, earliest human civilization point of view. And I think that when, there was famine in the agricultural, sector, then
Mm-hmm.
obviously we needed to fill that void, that caloric deficit, with anything that was available.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just a matter of, we were for many, 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 many years, as you pointed out, living in a period of total feast or famine, starvation, survival, survival of the fittest at its very best. And obviously now things are different. And I think that we can, I understand your genetic argument that, genetically speaking, we're not so different than those people running around,
Mm-hmm.
stabbing, I don't even know how they were hunting, but
Yeah.
what like tools they were using, but we're not so genetically different. But, epidemiologically speaking, we can look and see that, humans, maybe haven't, like you pointed out, maybe there hasn't been a purely vegan diet for more than a few generations.
Mm-hmm.
But there has been a starch-based diet throughout most of human history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Are you-
well, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, maybe like certain root plants, things like that. They were foraging those types of things. I mean, indigenous Australians still do that today. They forage the roots of certain types of plants, which is a very starchy based thing, but also a very nutrient dense thing. But I think that the fact that they were so after that animal fat, you know, that brain, that bone marrow, that type of stuff to keep them, because it was an awesome source of energy. I mean, not every hunter-gatherer people had access to olive oil and avocados and seeds and nuts and things like that. Like, it depended on where they were. They couldn't, you know, get it shipped to them or whatever. So again, just the fact that we did that for millions and millions of years means that our genes are set up for that. And there's no way that, you know, like the epidemic of heart disease is a cause of eating animal fats, because our genes have not changed that much.
But animal fat consumption has. I mean, human beings are eating way more animal products than historically.
Right. But what is the quality of that animal fat? That's the problem.
Sure, it's going in the tank.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about it.
Terrible.
But when you look at the when you look at the kind of basic building blocks of what is animal fat, what is animal protein, sure, there might be a few less vitamins and minerals. I know that omega-3 and omega-6 ratio is different.
Right.
But when you look at the basic kind of building blocks of what is animal fat and what is animal protein, it is what it is.
Yeah, but we're not necessarily talking about the nutrient content. Obviously, you know, like a wild animal or grass-fed animal has higher nutrient content than a CAFO, you know, fed livestock and things like that. But it's also the toxins, like the much higher toxins. And to me, if you ask me what causes heart disease, it's toxins. It's free radicals in our body. So whether that's, you know, the increase of free radicals from burning carbohydrates, or whether it's toxins, whether it's stress, whether it's high blood sugar from burning carbohydrates, those types of things are causing. I'm not saying that, you know, if you're eating the wrong types of plant foods, then that's going to be a problem. If you're eating the right types, it's not so much of a problem. But that's what causes heart disease. It's not animal fat.
Okay. So what about Ansel Keys?
Well, you do know that his studies were completely debunked by two scientists, a statistician out of New York and a UC Berkeley statistician. They repeated his study, and they used all the data available from all the countries at the time, because he only used 6 or 7 countries data, and he used the ones that he thought would show the highest correlation between animal fat and cholesterol and heart disease. And when those scientists went back and used all the data that was available from all 22 countries that were available at the time, there was no correlation.
Okay, well, I'm not familiar with that. That's pretty interesting. But
yeah,
I think that there's still plenty of evidence in terms of more modern research that's showing that animal fat and animal protein is associated with cardiovascular disease.
Well, there's also a lot of research, and I can provide it for you, that show that dietary saturated fat and cholesterol have no correlation with increased heart disease. And there's actually studies that show that people with higher cholesterol live longer. And that people with low cholesterol actually have a lot of issues.
Okay. Well, we know very well that we can handpick science and research, and
that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
And I am, I admit that I am probably the worst at handpicking science and research. So I'm not very good, But anyways, when it comes to our state of affairs today, because we do have like 1 in 2 people almost developing heart disease at some point in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying that it's a consequence of poor nutrient density in their animal fats. These people are eating plenty of animal fat, plenty of animal protein, but you're just saying it's the level of toxicity in their environment, and it's a level of a diminished level of the quality fat soluble vitamins. And
so if we look at, like, you take atherosclerosis for example. I mean, are you familiar with the work of Gerald Pollack, the 4th phase of water, that kind of thing? So he's shown that when water has the energy, like the water in our blood has enough energy, that it forms this exclusion zone water next to hydrophilic surfaces. And one of those surfaces is an artery, or, plant root. I mean, many different biological surfaces where this stuff forms.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it forms is that it cleaves off one of the hydrogens. And so you're left with a hydrogen and an oxygen, and those hydrogen and oxygens form together with other hydrogens and oxygens, and they make this exclusion zone water. And since the oxygen's a bigger molecule, that exclusion zone water is electronegative in nature, right? And so now we have this wall, this kind of protective wall of exclusion zone water next to around the circumference of the artery. Okay, so, and then if you look at what a free radical is, which, probably that free radicals are made just by burning any type of fuel source, whether it's a fat or a carbohydrate. But it's also toxins. It's also elevated blood sugar over time, also stress. Those things cause free radicals. And free radicals are unstable molecules. And they have an extra electron that they either want to get rid of or they want to grab another one and pair it with something. And since this exclusion zone water on the lining of our artery is electronegative in nature, it has electrons that free radicals go and take from. And so they'll take and they'll take and they'll take if we have, this oxidative stress, this abundance of free radicals. And eventually it breaks down this exclusion zone all the way to the point where it gets to the artery, the lining of the endothelia. And then the free radicals start pulling from that and they damage the lining of the artery. And so the body says, okay, now we've got this inflamed artery. It's going to rupture, a plaque may form, that kind of thing. What do we need to do? So it increases cholesterol in the blood to use it as spackle along with like phosphorus and minerals.
Doesn't necessarily increase cholesterol in the blood. It uses the cholesterol that's already in the blood to form plaques.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Dietary sources and liver production. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean,
that's the solution.
And if there was a lot of inflammation, the liver would make more cholesterol so that it could go and,
the plaques are the solution to the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes,
So
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe, I don't know if you're, statin drugs and everything, if we take cholesterol away from the blood and there's inflammation, that could potentially be dangerous. Now we're leaving that inflammation up to do harm,
Totally. So we need to support the endothelium, and we need to support the endothelium with antioxidants, right?
Which plants, for sure. Like beets, come on, like let's get some beets in there,
Yeah, antioxidant, phytonutrient rich plants are the important ingredient to support the endothelium. And when it comes to people, you take a 7-year-old and they've got a fatty streak in their artery, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that. Like kids have fat, the precursors of cardiovascular disease. So when you're attempting to reverse heart disease, how do you do that?
I increase their antioxidant quality for sure, especially foods that are higher in producing nitric oxide, which is incredibly healing to.
Well, nitric oxide dilates the blood vessels.
Right, but it's also made in the endothelia.
Right.
So it's supportive of, healing of it, but the other thing is decrease toxins for sure, detoxify the body. So stop putting toxins in, which is, our food is incredibly toxic, or our standard American diet is incredibly toxic. But also, you end up burning, if you're eating just carbohydrates or more carbohydrates, you're making more free radicals. So if we want to decrease the amount of free radicals that we're making.
Well, you've said that a few times. You've said, carbohydrate burning produces free radicals. I know that burning protein produces far more free radicals than carbohydrate burning. I mean, and, it's all about quality as well.
Right.
So, yeah. So, like you've also said, burning anything produces free radicals.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that sane carbohydrate consumption produces free radicals. It's like, yes, the human metabolism produces free radicals. I don't think we need to single in on any.
Well, I think we should. I think that, proteins and carbohydrates definitely cause more free radicals production, because when you burn a fat, you get more energy from it. So you don't have to burn another fat as quickly as you would have to burn another carbohydrate, because you burn through what your carbohydrate or your protein gives you quicker than you burn through a fat. So you end up just having to, pass the electrons down more, and you can show that, like the more, like you can put electrical current through the electron transport chain. And the more you drive it down, the more you use it, the more free radicals you get. And so, if we're getting, 4 kilocalories of energy from burning a carbohydrate, then we're going to have to burn another carbohydrate sooner because we get 9 from burning a fat. So that's not to say that animal protein is necessarily the best thing, but fat, yes.
How do you separate animal fat from animal protein? When you eat a steak, or when you eat a burger, it's fat and protein.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it's supposed to come. I mean, that's how it comes. So that if we're designed,
so if animal fat is good, but animal protein is bad, then like,
well, like I said, humans were cracking open skulls and cracking open bones to get bone marrow and brains. I mean,
I think that was definitely desperation at its worst.
Well, the fact that we have archaeological evidence that they did it, and who knows how much archaeological evidence we've lost just because the Earth didn't preserve it. If we found it in the ones we did find, I mean, it must have been happening a lot. I think that it probably took us some time to be good hunters, and we probably were a bit of scavengers for a while. So
I want to go back to reversing heart disease, which is a major thing that is important to do in our world today. And I know that the only way it's ever been done, clinically proven, is with a naturally low fat plant-based diet. So could you speak on that? Could you maybe debunk that or whatever?
Yeah. So if we look at like the China study, I don't know if you're referring to that, or Esselstyn and all those guys,
all those guys. Yeah. There's plenty of guys that are doing the phenomenal work of reversing heart disease with a low fat plant-based diet.
And there's plenty of people that have reversed it with not an animal based diet. But
I'd love to see case studies or whatever you're talking about when it comes to reversing heart disease.
Well, earlier you said that we can cherry pick evidence, and I can do it. You can do it. We can find evidence for either side.
Reversing heart disease, reversing atherosclerosis, like dissolving the plaques out of the coronary arteries.
Yeah, you could. I've had clients that have done that.
Please publish that, and or if it's not already published, and or show me what is published, because.
So I mean, back to like Esselstyn and the China study and those types of things. I mean, if you look at what those people were eating, like if you look at Forks Over Knives, and you look at what those people were eating before they went over to this plant-based diet, it was not very nutrient dense.
Totally.
So of course, if you provide the body with lots of antioxidants, of course, you're going to heal the arteries and it's going to go away. But it wasn't necessarily because they took out animal products. It's because they added in all this nutrient dense plants, which is incredibly important for health. Without quantifying that and taking that into account, you can't say that it was the removing of animal products, that did it, because you added in way more nutrients from plants. You can't make the claim that it was removing the animal products, because you made two very big changes. You removed animal products, but you also added in a ton of nutrients that the person was not getting before.
Well, I know that, other sorts of, Mediterranean diet, which, is a nutrient dense diet with animal fat and protein. That diet does not reverse heart disease.
Well, I mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
It doesn't. It was put to the test, and it doesn't.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of been overplayed in the media, the whole Mediterranean diet. I think.
I agree. I think people are.
But I think that it's been overplayed in the way that the French or Italians or whoever have less heart disease than us, but they still have heart disease. It's not like it's gone.
That's because they're still eating meat.
Well, no, I would say it's because they're still eating toxic meat, and they're still eating grains. I mean, if you look at the Italians and the French, they love their pasta and their bread.
So I want to. We could go on and on. It is a lot of fun to speak with someone who's knowledgeable and has some really rooted in their understanding of what's going on. I want to go back to like basic biochemistry. because glucose is the preferred source of fuel for the human body. I mean, when there's glucose in our, in our bloodstream, we're going to break that glucose down to create energy.
Mm-hmm.
And fat, yes, we know, there's a lot of scientific research that shows that when we're fasting, we can access fat stores, break down fat for energy.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that energy, this cellular energy, through the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation, all that stuff, cellular energy is required, obviously, for our brains to think, for our hearts to pump, for everything that we're doing, for our bodies to heal. We need a lot of cellular energy. So I know that there's a lot of, evidence showing that low carbohydrate diets increase mortality, overall all-cause mortality. And I believe for that reason, because we're eliminating the body's preferred fuel source. Maybe not eliminating, but because it's impossible to eliminate. If we eliminate it, we die. If we eliminate carbohydrates, we die. So from that kind of basic biochemistry perspective of bodies utilizing glucose for fuel, could you talk to me here?
Yeah. So there's actually lots of studies that show that the organs prefer to burn fat as their fuel source. Like when they're faced with a choice, they prefer to do that. The brain and the heart specifically. Yes, glucose is very, very important. And the brain does like glucose, but it also likes ketones, which is a byproduct of burning fat and having fats around.
That science doesn't seem so pure and clean to me. I know there's we can cherry pick it, I know, but
yeah.
I think that it's a lot more anecdotal in nature. Like people say, oh yeah, I feel great eating all this fat. Oh yeah, I've got my ketone supplement and like my ketones are this level and I feel great. But I think that the vast majority of people don't feel great. And like, it's much more of this kind of psychosomatic high of, yes, I'm burning fat, I'm biohacking, I'm, doing this. And fasting, is the primary way that I get into ketosis. And it takes some time for me to kind of get a clear mind. I wouldn't say it feels great. I feel like I'm fasting.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to, again, looking at big picture of things and realizing that we're all genetically different. I think that, there's tests you can do now that show you process and burn fat better than other people, or this person doesn't. This person needs more carbohydrates and that kind of thing. And that goes back to, maybe your ancient ancestors were in a place where they had lots of fruit around.
I think that all of our ancient ancestors are from a place of lots of fruit, because we, the human species developed from like equatorial regions, right? And kind of
right. But there was still, like Neanderthals and people like, still way longer than 10,000 years ago, they crossed the Bering Strait. It was pretty cold up there. There wasn't any fruit around. So for a long time, they were eating, there were certain groups of people that weren't eating much fruit because it wasn't around. There were, but for the most part, there was lots of human evolution was taking place around the equator. So
well, this is fun. I don't think we're gonna like come to any consensus, which is totally fine. But it's fun. I would like to switch the conversation over to the environment for a little bit. I know that, it's important that we heal this planet, because we kind of started the conversation by talking about, well, something that I always say is we can only be as healthy as our environment, and our environment is shit. And it seems like, by all, weights and measures, it's just going downhill. So how do we fix this?
Yeah, right. So, and to be honest with you, like everything I'll say is just, I tell you, I don't know. I mean, it's why I wrote this book, because I don't know exactly how to fix it. I feel like in the book I give a kind of a starting point, but I don't think it's an interim solution, because I really don't know if I have one. I mean, so our current way of producing food in the masses, whether it's plant or animal food, is not sustainable whatsoever. So we've got to find either a different way to do it, or find a way to have less people to feed, because feeding this many people in any way is one of the biggest challenges of the future. So yeah, I mean, I can go right into, you know, the issues of animal and plant-based farming, and how agriculture in general is just not sustainable no matter how you do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
So
problem.
let's do a little visionary experiment.
Yeah.
Like, how do you envision, say that somehow humans come out of this mess and, like, I don't know, maybe there's just like a total epiphany that we all collectively have.
Hmm.
How are we living sustainably with a population of 8 billion people or 10 billion people or whatever it is on this planet? What does it look like?
I don't.
Does it look like, hunting and gathering?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. There's
Does
no
it?
way if we all went to hunter-gatherer diets tomorrow, we would totally decimate the entire earth. Like,
Yeah.
the deer would be dead in a week probably. You know, like all these
Yeah.
key species, and I mean, that's kind of how things are supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be an ecosystem, and everything's supposed to keep each other in balance. You know, it's supposed to put limits on how much one certain species can populate. And when humans got smart and figured out, you know, civilization and farming and things like this, it allowed us to grow in numbers exponentially. And so that has, you know, was been great for our species. You know, we've, you know, we've pretty much mastered evolution, and we conquered it a little bit. But it's proving to have a lot of problems for the future. Like, how do we sustain this? We've gotten ourselves into a big mess.
Well, I know that, when it comes to, factory farming and the agricultural system,
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are billions, like tens of billions. I forget the number. I was going to write it down, but there's tens of billions, maybe 100 billion animals that
Mm-hmm.
are artificially put on this planet for human consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those animals are eating way more food than humans would. For example, I know a cow eats like 25 times more food than a human does. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if a human were just to eat that food.
Yeah, and that's not the cow's fault. I mean, that's our fault for exploiting the cow, you know. But
Well, even if whether the cow is eating grass, whether the cow is eating corn or soy, the cow is still going to be eating taking way more resources than a human would. So
right,
we've got a population problem. We've got
yeah,
an extreme population problem. There's 8 billion people. There's hundreds of billions of animals that are artificial, not wild animals,
mm-hmm.
farmed animals that are
Right,
artificially put here to feed the 8 billion people.
mm-hmm.
So we've got a population problem, but it's artificially human synthesized, and we can fix it by just choosing not to rely on animal flesh as
False.
fuel.
So, so there used to be about 100 million bison in the United States before
Oh,
humans came.
100 million bison, that's nothing.
I know. I'm just
That's
saying.
nothing. 100 million bison compared to like 100 billion cows.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
yeah.
But the point is that those animals were part of an ecosystem. Okay, and without them, the ecosystem would not have been there. Right? It would not have been thriving. It just would have been nothing. And so we have to acknowledge that animals are going to be part of the solution.
Totally.
Because
Hopefully wild animals, right? Like wild animals.
hopefully, but I think we're a little bit past that point. I don't think that we could rely on wild animals to do that for us.
I think if we get out of the way,
Maybe, yeah.
get out of the way.
Over time, but if we just got out of the way and let that happen, would we be able to produce enough food for billions of people? I don't
There's no food shortage. There's no food
know.
shortage.
What about quality food shortage?
Well, I think we've got a little discrepancy on what quality food means. To me, quality food is a fucking potato, rice, and beans. Like that has sustained human, like, going back to the prior conversation, that has sustained human cultures for,
I mean,
generations, centuries, millennia.
Do you know that the ancient Egyptians, like they did CT scans on the mummies, and they all had heart disease, or like a large percentage of them had heart disease. And they were a farming culture. They ate mostly wheat, and animal products were not high on their food chain. They ate that sometimes, but it was mainly emmer and wheat and barley. And so that to me tells me that it's possible to develop heart disease on a plant-based diet. And we have lots and lots of evidence of that because the Egyptian culture was, has been well studied. So, whatever you said made me think of that. But so you're pointing out these issues with animal farming, but there are just as many, if not more, issues with plant farming. And
I think we need to point out that greater than 50% of the plants that are farmed for animals.
Okay, that's great. But farming itself is totally destroying an ecosystem. Like that's not sustainable. Like we need ecosystem.
How are you going to get your food?
What do you mean how?
If you don't have a farm, to grow food, like those polyphenols and antioxidants, those beets that you love, how are you going to get them?
Well, you get them from animals. Like that's a very, very nutrient dense source.
You get your polyphenols and your antioxidants and those nutrients that heal the vascular system.
They're pretty high in wild animals. They're higher in plants. You're right, but they're pretty high in wild animals, and that's why people went. And how do you nourish
your microbiome? The microbiome is, we could go on and on about the microbiome and how important it is to diversify that. We are only as healthy as the microbes that we have inside of ourselves. And those microbes rely on plants.
Yeah, they also rely on animal fats and fats in general.
No, they don't.
They do, man. Like there's definitely beneficial compounds that are made when you eat fat. Just like there's beneficial compounds that are made when you eat plants. We're omnivores. That's the point here. We're designed to eat both. They're both beneficial for us. And there's many examples of societies who ate either higher percentages of one or the other. Like we are the ultimate adapting species. We can do both. Mm-hmm. That's the point.
Yeah, totally. I love that. We can. And we are faced with this opportunity that I see. Mm-hmm. We can kill ourselves and the planet by continuing on this route, or we can turn this ship around and go in a different direction. And we have the anatomical and genetic variation that allows us to choose kind of our destiny in this way.
Okay. Well, there's absolutely no evidence that we can do this generation after generation, be vegans. I don't know that it would be ethical to put anybody through that experiment. But
we don't need a world of vegans. We don't need a world of vegans. How about the Okinawans? How about the Sardinians? How about all of these blue zones that eat this much meat? Much meat, like less than 2% of their diets from meat.
But they're still eating meat.
Yeah, sure. But we need to eat this much meat.
And I'm not arguing with that at all. I'm totally on board with plant-based, but we need animal products in some capacity to give us those nutrients. I mean, we can store B12 and we can store it for a reason. It's because we're not supposed to eat it all the time, but we're supposed to eat it sometimes and store it.
Yeah, we can store it for 4 years, and B12 doesn't even come from animals. So we know that. But
it comes from bacteria. Yeah. But we get it from animals as well.
Well, animals are actually deficient in B12. That's why animals that are farmed get B12 shots, just like humans that are farmed to get B12 shots. We need B12 because we've decimated our bacterial ecosystem. So yes, we're on the same page that we need to. It sounds like we're on the same page that we need to cut down meat. So if we're not eating meat, if we're eating 2% meat instead of 50% meat, I don't know, I don't know what these percentages are.
Yeah. And who knows?
But if we're eating 2% meat, then what else are we eating?
Plants, obviously. But
you said that we can't farm. So where do we get these plants?
we have to understand at a fundamental level, farming is not sustainable. It's not how nature designed things. We are totally depleting the soils. If you grow one crop or 5 or 6 crops on one soil, you're depleting it of nutrients. Just tilling the soil is destroying it. That's not how it's designed to be done. It's designed to be a forest or a grassland or something like that, with lots of different species interacting all together.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to do it much more responsibly. We know how to regenerate the ecosystem through farming and how to do it, and obviously without pesticides and GMOs and all that stuff. It's like, duh, we can do it, and we need to do that, right? To sustain, if
given the fact that we have 7 billion people in the world, yes, we need to do that.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that many people, no, we wouldn't.
Like I kind of brought forward, we've got this population problem, but it's not humans that are the problem. Humans, we've got, there's a lot of humans that are problems, but by and large, when it comes to the biomass, the mass of life on the earth, it's not humans that are the problem. Humans are a fraction, like the smallest fraction of biomass on the planet. We have a hugely growing amount of artificially placed biomass in terms of meat, in terms of cows and pigs and chickens, and we have a totally diminishing, shrinking little speck of wild biomass, wild fauna. I think we need to point out there are like hundreds of species that we are losing on this planet every day, most of which we don't know of. We're losing acreage of rainforest to quench our craving for animal flesh.
Yeah, well, I totally get it. I mean, there's too many animals, just like there's too many people. But if we look at like the greenhouse gases, if we look at carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, methane is one that doesn't last that long. It's as far as long as like carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide. So the problem is that we've increased the animals. You're right. Because if we kept the herd size the same, after about 12 years, the methane produced from them would be gone, and it would be like a wash. It would just stay even after that. But since we've increased the amount of animals, we've gotten ourselves into an issue. But nitrous oxide or nitrous oxide in general stays around a lot longer, and it's the most harmful greenhouse gas, and that comes from chemical fertilizers or any type of fertilizer.
We don't need chemical. We shouldn't be using chemical fertilizers. We should be.
So what do you have to use?
We use animal shit like we've always used.
Exactly. So we need animals.
Yeah, animals are part of the human ecosystem.
Exactly.
We need animals.
Yeah.
And they should, and ideally, they're wild animals, just as they have been throughout the history of the human planet. Wild animals walking around, eating grass, pooping. We're growing stuff in their poop. We're eating stuff from that, and we're scavenging. We're hunting for mushrooms, and we're wild foraging, and we're also eating stuff that we grow with the help of animal poop.
Like and animal bones and blood and things like that. When they die, they give the soil nutrients. I think a lot of the issue is that we do have all these animals and humans, and they're holding all the nutrients, and we're kind of messing with that life cycle. Withholding all this life form is taking away from the health of the planet and the soil. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just kind of this thing that I thought of. We hold a lot of it, all these things that are living, we're keeping things alive for a long time, whether it's animals or humans. And there's not enough to go around for the soils,
Yeah. Well, I mean, a cow that's in a farm, whether it's eating corn, soy, or grass, it is eating 50 pounds of food a day. So energetically, that cow is a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So could we agree that we should not farm meat and chickens?
It depends on what you mean by farming. I mean, I think that grass feeding, place them on this artificially inseminate animals
for our disposal. That's what farm.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, and that's what we're doing at higher rates. We're also, you know, artificially inseminating cows for, you know, to quench our desire for, you know, animal secretions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that, you know, you pointed out a really great point in how adaptable the body is. We can experience like all sorts of stress, and we ideally we want to like harmonize our environment and live in a way that is optimal, but we don't need to thrive. It seems like we can, you know, let's say that a fully plant-based diet, like a human being could survive, because I think there's plenty of evidence. You know, you said a few times that, well, you know, there hasn't been many generations of vegans, but there's plenty of evidence that human beings can thrive without meat.
I don't know about that. I mean,
I don't eat meat.
Survive, yes. Survive, yes, but thrive over generations.
What about all the vegan athletes who are outperforming their omnivorous?
Again, that's
components?
That's thrive for, you know, the optimal years of their life when their physiology is functioning at their optimal anyways, and they may have genetics that do really well with that. So, but as far as like thrive, like generation after generation, I don't think so. We don't have that evidence.
Right, we don't have that evidence yet, but we need it. we need it.
Well, it may never come. We may do a experiment that ends up quite.
Well, you know, like the Seventh-day Adventists, I don't know how many generations, you know, they've been living with in their culture, with their ethics, and with their, you know, food choices, but it's a mostly vegan, you know, group of people that they live longer than any other people in our country.
Right, and they can survive in the modern day society we've created. That's very easy. Okay, but that does not mean our physiology was not meant to take in those high quality nutrients from animals when life was very hard.
So
when we were out in the wild.
So if they're living beyond 100 years of life, like much more frequently than any other population within our country, then how can you say that they're not thriving? How can you say that they're just surviving?
Because we've made life very, very easy. We're all in temperature controlled environments. We all get access. We don't have to work very hard for food.
Totally.
I mean, you know, like that's easy for people to live that long, whether they're eating plants or animals. People who eat animals live that long too.
Exactly. Here, we're not going backwards. We're going forwards. We've got technology. We've got heated houses. We've got air conditioning. We've got access to, we've got, you know, Amazon delivery. We've got cross-country travel. We've got all these things.
Yeah.
It's not, they're not going away.
Right.
They're not going away. We're not going back to caveman days. I don't want to. I don't want to. I know you don't want to. And we don't need to. We're here. So given the fact that we are here with modern technology, with, you know, one-click ordering of next day delivery things, given the fact that we've got this world that we've created, we're a part of, then we can survive and thrive longer than any other population on a plant-based diet.
You don't.
Why wouldn't we do that?
You don't know that. Generation after generation, you don't know that.
All right, so
I mean, you say the Seventh-day Adventists have done that, but I don't know that they have.
So maybe it's not generation after generation. Maybe it's just one generation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just one. Maybe it's two. Maybe we squeak out another. We don't know. Why not try? Because that is the most sustainable way to live. Why not try?
I don't agree. I mean, the most sustainable way to live is the way Mother Nature has done it for billions of years, and that involves.
But we're not going back. But we're not going. No, given the nature of the world that we've created, the most sustainable way is to not rely on animal flesh. I mean, it costs us like thousands of gallons of water, thousands of, you know, the oil.
So does plant agriculture. Agriculture does the same thing. Like 70% of the water used in most countries is for plant agriculture. But
50% and greater than 50% of that agriculture is feeding animals.
I mean,
we're growing a lot of plants.
Any way that we're doing agriculture is unsustainable. That's my point. Plant or animal. and trying to figure out how to feed 7 billion people in any way, whether it's plant or animals, is going to be a hard thing to do.
But back to this point that the population problem, the 7 or 8 billion people, that's not the problem. The problem is all the cows that we're feeding.
No, that is the problem. That is the problem. Because if you try and feed 7 billion people with just plants, there's going to be nothing left in the soil. And if you try and if you put it back, and if you try and put it back with chemical fertilizers, when that runs out, how are you going to feed 7 billion people? Like, how are you going to create? How are you going to create that much manure with animals? You're going to have a lot of animals to do that.
No. Listen. We're farming fruits and vegetables and, you know, grains now. 50% of that is going to feed livestock. 50% of, you know, agriculture in this country is going to feed livestock. If we, you know, and livestock eat 50 pounds of corn and soy and grain and whatever it is a day, you know, in order to feed us. So if we just eat that food, then we will need such a small fraction of farmland. We will need such a small fraction of farmland. All the rest of the land, we'll give it back to nature. Nature will roam, nature will poop, nature will do its thing. There will be animals coming back. You know, there'll be thriving, you know, ecosystems. Trees will grow. We'll be able to sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Everything is good.
And we'll be struggling with our health.
Well, if we agree that our health is interdependent on the health of the planet, then if we give the planet back health, can't you agree that on some level we will also start to regain our health?
On some level, yes, but
think of the toxins. Think of the toxins that you talked about as being a huge problem. Think of all of the runoff from the pesticides. Huge problem.
If we're giving nature, you know, if we're stepping out of the way and allowing nature to do that, yes, definitely. But we can't do it sacrificing our health. And like, I'm sorry, Benjamin, but, you know, we've been eating animals for 6 million years, and our genes, you know, the majority of our genes are evolved to that diet. I mean, there's hunter-gatherers that eat pretty much meat, blood, and milk, and they're thriving, just like the Seventh-day Adventists who are thriving on their plant-based diet. Like,
totally,
there are people that can do that, you know. So I think that demonizing animal food or animal food consumption is not the way forward. I think that we need to figure out a way to make it work, and maybe what you're suggesting is a way forward. Maybe that's something we should try. But I don't think, you know, maybe for some of us it would work to go totally plant-based, but I think we would see a lot of suffering and death if everyone was made to do that.
I want to talk about, you know, I know we're going way longer, and maybe I'll edit some stuff down, but maybe not. Maybe it'll just be like a special episode. But I want to talk about genetic, you know, this whole idea of bio-individuality and genetic variation. Because I know that human beings, me and you, we're 99.999% genetically identical. We've got such a fraction of genes that are different. It's it's our eye color, our hair, our nose, our skin tone. Like, these kind of things are what makes human beings genetically unique. But when it comes to our enzymes, when it comes to our digestive tract, when it comes to our biology, we're the same. Same. If one person can thrive for a lifetime on a plant-based diet, then I would argue that yes, it is absolutely possible for every human being to thrive on a plant-based diet. Well, given that they're able to do it with enough awareness of how to incorporate enough diverse fruits and vegetables that meet all the nutritional needs, which isn't that complicated. You just eat the rainbow and you just get enough calories. You know, it's not that complicated.
Well, I think that we have identified that there are differences in metabolism, genetic differences in metabolism between people. And they may be subtle, but they are there. I mean, some people digest fat way better than others. Some people do better with saturated fat than others. And it's just how it is. And so I think that, you know, again, when we have conflicting research and conflicting evidence, I mean, we just found out about epigenetics. What else are we going to find out about genes? You know, I don't think we have the whole picture.
Totally.
And so when I know that, when I see conflicting evidence and, you know, this research says that, this research says this, we don't know everything about genes, I have to step back and look at the big picture. And the big picture is that we've been eating animals for a long time. And given the slowness of evolutionary change, there's no way we could have adapted to a 100% plant-based diet in the amount of time that we've had to change, or that we've been.
It doesn't have to be 100. It doesn't have to be 100%. We can, you know, cook with butter if people really need that. You know, we can take our cod liver oil, even though that's one of the least sustainable things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We can do a little bit of this stuff.
Yeah, I think we would have to, or at least a large percentage of the population would have to. Not everybody would, but I mean, there's obviously evidence of people who've lived a very long time and thrived, so to speak, eating plants. At least they say they did. But I think that a large percentage of the population would have to have some. Maybe they're just not that great. Maybe they can't convert beta carotene to vitamin A, and they start losing their eyesight and their skin and everything like that. Like maybe. I don't know, but those are just things we don't know.
Yeah, well, I do know, because there's plenty of people who don't eat animal source fat soluble vitamins and they don't lose their eyesight. That's never
not like in a week or in a month or a year, but
no, that's never happened. That's never happened.
Because maybe nobody's done it from, you know, the day they were born until they were 100 years old.
Sure, there's plenty of people who have lived vegan for their whole life.
Okay, where are they?
They're out there, and there's more of them.
Okay, so if I've done this experiment before, but not in front of that many people. I know people who have done it in front of a crowd of like 15,000 people or something like that. Maybe it wasn't that much. It was a lot of people though. But he's done it over and over again. You know, he asked the room, how many people know someone who's a vegan? And then most people raise their hands. People know someone. And then they say, how many people know someone who's been a vegan for 5 years? And some people put their hand down, and he keeps going up and he goes up, and he gets to about 10 to 15 years, and there's no one left in the room. Maybe one person with their hand up.
Yeah.
So like that's just anecdotal. That doesn't mean anything. But
well, I'll tell you what it means. To me, it means that we live in a world where animal flesh and animal secretion consumption is normal.
I think that there's a reason that people want it. Like if you look at behavioral physiology and evolution, there's a reason that people want it.
If you put like
you're denying your body that urge, that what it needs, what it wants. I think there's a certain wisdom to the body knowing what it needs, and we've lost that. Just like domesticated dogs have lost that. They'll eat anything off the table. But
I love looking at children. I feel like children have so much inherent wisdom and so much intuition. If you put a child in front of a animal and in front of a plate of orange slices or grapes, that the child is going to go and pet the animal, hug the animal, and eat the grapes, eat the orange.
That doesn't mean that
they're not gonna.
That doesn't mean that we're not designed to kill. I mean, that's just some humans uncomfortable with death. That's what that is. Because
some humans are uncomfortable with killing and death. I hope that all humans are uncomfortable with killing and death.
I think that's, I mean, no offense or anything, but I think that's naive. I think that death and you know, a circle of life is the way of life on this planet since life has been on it.
Right, but humans haven't been at the top of the food chain.
Yeah. So
we put ourselves there.
If we look at, you know, humans have you know, been part of this ecosystem, and things have killed us, and we've killed other things, and that's just how it works. You know, plants are designed to be killed as well, because we do kill plants. Just because they don't have feelings doesn't mean that we don't kill them, you know. But I think that we have made our lives very easy. We don't see that death that happens. That's what I would say is necessary, whether it's a plant or an animal. It's necessary death to for something to stay alive, you know. And so we don't see that anymore, and we grow up with animals as cartoon characters on TV, and they're our friends and all this kind of stuff. And then, we grow up and we maybe we're confronted with that death in some way. Maybe we go to, or we see images of a feedlot, or we watch some documentary or something like that. And then, we're told that the solution to this is to not eat animals, and that it's possible, and we can solve all those conflicting problems in our body and in our mind by just not eating animals. And I think that that's an incredibly naive way to look at things, because it's not black and white like that. You can't just not eat animals and expect all the problems to go away. And that's I guess that's the main point of why I agreed to come on here and talk with you, is that I wanted to, us to go back and forth and get people to realize how complicated this is. Yeah. This is not just, oh, I can be a vegan and I'm doing the best I can and I'm saving the world. That's not how it works. There's many other issues we have to solve. And I think that, I appreciate that it didn't get too heated, that we just kind of
I think there's a good level of heat. Yeah.
Yeah, but we just expressed our opinions. And
I feel a little heated.
Yeah, but the point is that we have to be able to come together.
Yeah.
Solve these issues. If we can't talk knowledgeably and respect each other's opinions, we're never going to get anywhere. And we're all,
totally.
we have fate,
Yeah. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation, because I think that one of my favorite quotes is, problems cannot be solved from the level of consciousness from which they're created. That's, an Einstein quote. And what that means is we need to think outside of the box. And the solution that we are seeking is not right in front of us. Or, maybe it is, but we've got to create some sort of creative way of accessing it.
Yeah.
And I think that we can kind of bounce ideas around in our own head and our own communities in this kind of echo chamber of sorts and get nowhere. Yeah. and
sure.
honestly, I do feel a little frustrated and a little irritated, because I really do believe that, if I gave you the opportunity to just envision what it looks like, I said, what does it look like having 7-8 billion people on the planet and in a world that is thriving? When I envision that, I can see it so clearly what it looks like. I can see so clearly what it looks like, and it's not complicated. It's not restrictive. I know that there's the circle of life. I know that animals are living and dying. I know humans are living and dying. I'm comfortable with that, and I just see it so clearly, and living, maybe like we've talked about, maybe it's not 100% plant-based, maybe it's 99 or 98 or 95%, that's what it is, that's what it is. And
well, I just don't think that, I understand you have the vision. I appreciate you have that vision, and that's a very optimistic way to look at the world. And I'm an optimist too. I tend to find the good in people and look for, a way out instead of just saying, oh, we're screwed, but I think that, I hope that you're right. I hope that there is some easy solution in front of us, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. And I don't think that just choosing to not eat animals is going to be the solution to that problem. And I don't want to put that out into the world, and I've been where you were. I remember sitting at a table at a restaurant when I was vegan and saying the same things you were saying to that person. And he didn't, it wasn't a very good conversation. It wasn't like this one, he was just like, no, you're dumb, that kind of thing. But I remember being on that side of things, and I learned new information and I flipped. Doesn't mean that you would. You seem, pretty passionate about that, and that's great. But I've seen both sides of it, and I flipped because of the information that I found out about the environment, about nutrition, about sustainability, those types of things. But I don't think either of us knows the answer. That's the point.
Yeah. So human beings, given the trajectory that we're at today, I don't know what the current estimate is for how many years or generations or whatever human beings have left on the planet before this thing kicks us off.
Yeah.
But don't you think we should try something? Don't we,
Yeah. That's what my book is all about. It's about trying something. And I think that, not to give away my book, but the whole second half of it pretty much is how people, I just think, whether it's plants or animals, you know, if you're just more conscious about your health, if you're more conscious about the decisions you make every single day, it's going to result in not only better health for you, but better health for the planet. I mean, something that's totally, you know, not even plant animal based at all, but plastics, you know, like they're destroying the ocean, and we rely on the ocean for a lot of things. And, you know, if we keep destroying it, we're going to suffer. But not only that, we're suffering right now from our exposure to plastics. You know, it's endocrine disruptors, acts like estrogen in the body and causes, it's been linked to breast cancer and all that kind of stuff. And that's just one example of the many different problems there are. And so if you look at all the aspects of health, like we have to consciously, every single thing we do every single day has to be a conscious thing. Eventually you do it enough that it becomes an unconscious thing. It's just what you do. But just, you know, whether the end result ends up being that, yes, we should try plant-based, yes, we should try omnivore, whatever, you know, right now we just need more people to be aware of the things they're doing every single day.
I think we're on the same page there. I think a lot of people are blind consumers, and I think that we need to be aware of uncomfortably aware sometimes of exactly what goes into everything that we put into our body. And I know it's an exercise that I engage with, but I think that if everyone did that, that would be a huge step in the right direction.
I think if everybody did that, the solution would start to present itself.
Yeah.
But until people do that, I don't know that we know.
So maybe that's the take-home message: is just be uncomfortably aware with everything that you're putting in your body, and
then vote with your dollar.
Vote with your dollars, and the thing is, like, you know, when I think of you know, putting, obviously there's scales of meat, right? There's crap meat and there's better meat, and we just have such limited access to the good meat, like the better meats. You know, I know that I just don't know how it's going to happen, but we'll see. I think that if we just put you know, if we intentionally, you know, if the message is just to raise your awareness of your consumption,
right?
Then I like the idea. Then the answer will present itself. So maybe we should end on that
it's a good
unanimous, harmonious note. It's been really, like I said, I like getting out of my comfort zone, getting out of the box, and having new conversations and expanding my understanding around different topics. And this has been a great one. And
I think it's been great.
And obviously, you've written a book that you've mentioned. I didn't give you that much of an opportunity to share about it. I'm sorry about that. But what's it called, and where can people find it?
It's called The Health Evolution, why understanding evolution is the key to vibrant health. And it's on Amazon right now. Just search The Health Evolution and it'll be there.
Cool. Awesome. And where can people find more about who you are and what you're doing? Like, are you on social media and stuff?
Yeah, I'm on social media. Most of it's just Dr. Stephen Hussey, Dr. Stephen Hussey. And I also have a website called resourceyourhealth.com where I run my health coaching through. So
awesome. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Dr. Stephen Hussey, thanks for hanging with me in this conversation. It's been a roller coaster, but thanks for I feel like usually I'm the more grounded person in a conversation, but I feel like in this conversation you've been grounding to me. So I thank you for.
No, thank you for cool. Thanks for having me on. Keep up the good work. We'll get the message out there.
Cool. Yeah. Raise awareness. Be more conscious.
Exactly.
You know, be more compassionate, I think, is also a message.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, symbolized in us coming together here. I think that's great. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, peace and love. And until next time.
All right. Have a good day.